a separate piece. It's a weighted piece. So this one is 11-gram tray that comes. It bolts on 4 little screws. It bolts onto the chassis. Hello folks, welcome to Netcruzer RC. Alright, I've been working on a new race buggy for my 2-wheel drive racing season, 1/10 scale 2-wheel drive. Here it is. It's built, and we're going to go through the build video now, and I'm going to talk to you about what this car is and what I've done to it. Alright, so this is a Team Associated B6.4D. I ordered this within a month of it coming out. This has been on the market early April of 2022, and this is still currently, at the time of filming, this is the newest Team Associated 2-wheel drive buggy on the market. And this is the 0.4. A significant amount of changes over the 6.3. Actually, something that I've been planning to do for quite a while is to try a B6, and I had actually purchased a B6.3 last year, and then I ended up liking my Yokomo so much. I've been racing a Yokomo YZ2 DTM3 for the past 2 years. I like that car so much that I didn't end up building the B6.3, and then the 6.4 was announced, so I sold the 6.3 and I bought the 6.4. So let's just go over some of the reasons why I chose a 6.4 and what's new about it. Some of the highlights are on the box. You get bigger shocks, you get a different style of chassis, you get some slightly changed suspension geometry, you get some tweaked things like cage thrust bearings, but the big things are the chassis and the shocks. So let me just top the body off. If you've been following along with my on-road racing, this is the kind of color scheme that I went with on-road, and I've decided to carry it forward into off-road as I'm kind of cycling up the fleet. This is the first of the off-road cars that is a new build. I'll be refreshing my 4-wheel drive as well as I have a new 8 scale to build. This is now my 3rd 2-wheel drive buggy since getting into 2-wheel drive buggies since around 2019. So I've tried the TLR 22.5.0 Elite, I've tried the Yokomo YZ2 DTM3, and now we're trying the Team Associated RC10 B6.4D. Been taking some clips as I was building some pieces and just kind of talk about how you start the build. Manual here, we're not going to go through step by step, but just some of the interesting things I want to mention along the way. With any of the B6 builds, you're starting off, step 1 is to build the bell cranks. The steering bell crank system here is all plastic, but it does have bearings. The actual servo itself is not making contact onto the bottom of the chassis. It is floating, but it's in that clamp. The upper bulkhead is plastic. It just bolts onto the chassis. And then you're putting on the front arms. Now the front arms, I do believe they've stayed the same. These are called the gull wings, but it's funny enough, actually the rear has more of a gull wing than the front does. And then you're building out the knuckles, and these have carbon fiber little inserts and pieces that you build out the front knuckles with. When you're building out the front knuckles, just be aware that the caster hat bushings are different sizes. So there's a taller one and a skinnier one. You always want the taller one on the top. None of the arms or anything required any reaming. When you're putting the hinge pins through, which is a step that on previous old kits you would always have to kind of like ream arms out and stuff so that they would free flow. And something that I really like, and one of the reasons why I chose a Team Associated car, is I love how the front end is designed because the shocks attach behind the shock tower, and the front shock tower has this little protective cover on the top so that when you crash and when you fall upside down, you're going to be scraping the shock tower on the plastic instead of the shocks. If you look at any of my other cars, you see one of the first things that get hit when you flip upside down is the top of the shock caps and the shock standoffs. With this buggy, they're all in behind, protected front end, which I love that. As well as they've even done that to the rear, where you have little plastic caps here over the rear shock tower too. I'm adjusting my geometry a little bit to the front to a 25-degree kick-up. The rear has the pill inserts. Now I am running kit spec. For the setup is 3 degrees toe in and 2 degrees anti-squat. Then once you've got your front end and your rear end on with the shock towers, you haven't built any shocks or anything yet. Now you're going to start working on the transmission. And I was happy to see that you still get the 2 transmissions with the B6.4D. When they came up with the sales announcement of this model, it didn't specify that, so I wasn't actually sure until I opened it. Always before on the B6s you got a lay down and a lay back. Same with this, and the kit spec is to build it with the lay down. Now I've talked a couple to my other racers, and they agreed that the lay down is a little bit faster even for our track, which doesn't have the highest grip levels all the time. They found it just to be more consistent with the lay down. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Before you build the transmission and get it onto the chassis, you start by building out the ball differentials. And a couple of revisions to the ball diff as well in this build is that the thrust bearing is finally captured. So if you ever watched my build video of the TLR, you would have saw that I lost a ball on that initial build, is because it escaped from me, even with a magnetic mat. But now, with the B6.4, you get a captured thrust bearing, which I love that. That's excellent. So thank you very much, Team Associated. Also, setting the diff adjustment, once you get the balls in the gear, get them lubricated, sandwich it together, the adjustment for setting it is very easy, because there's these little caps, little plastic caps on either end, and you just tighten it down until the caps reach their end point, and then you back it off 1/8 of a turn. It's very simple to set, well adjusted. You do not get sway bars in the kit, but it does come with instructions of how to build them out if you do want to add sway bars to your kit. I'm not aware of anyone who runs a sway bar on their two-wheel drive, so I don't have it. And then you start building out the transmission, and like I mentioned, you do get both the lay down and the lay back. You get the two transmission style casings, as well as you get the different idler gear size. You need the 39 tooth running the lay down. Then you install this rear mount on the transmission, which is a nice aluminum anodized piece. Quite a few nice blue anodized pieces in this kit. I do like that. Then you're adjusting your diff height setting, which the kit setup is 2, so you do that as well. And you do that by adjusting these little inserts here, as well as when you install the front end, there is also little inserts as well that you put in that is your axle heights as well, so you can adjust all that. This is a race car. There's a lot of adjustability to it. After your transmission on, then you're building up the spur gear. Spur gear system on a Team Associated car, this is what I think is the most difficult step of the whole build, is you get a steel lay shaft for your slipper clutch, and then there's a pin, like a spring pin, that you're supposed to press in. This is for the slipper clutch on the Associated B6.4D, and as well as the 6.3, 6.2, 6.1, 6. It's a pin that you have to pound in or push in to your slipper clutch lay shaft, and it's real tight. So I still have never come up with a good method for this, so I'm just trying different things, but I don't actually remember how I did this last time. But I'm hoping that'll do. And it is extremely tight. Press and pound it in best you can. I did it in a very crude manner, as I have on both this and my stadium truck, but it gets done. I've recently learned that if you ever find that you just can't do that step, if you don't have the tools or the patience and you just cannot get that done, you can buy the upgrade, which is a titanium lay shaft, and it comes with the pin already installed. So you can just do that. Reduces rotating mass by 40% too. Now, the Team Associated slipper clutches on the Buggy, you get the better Octolock spur pads. They lock into this spur gear. You get 2 sizes of spur gear in the kit. I'm running the 78 tooth. You also get a 72 tooth if you want to run in stock classes. If your spur pads do not have the little tabs, and if they don't look like they're made of like a fiber paper, they're the older style. So consider getting Octolock slipper pads. It made a huge difference. I was having all kinds of weird slip problems on my stadium truck. Once I put on the Octolock slipper pads, it all went away, consistent again. The other thing that's weird about the slipper clutch system is just in how you have to sandwich the 2 plates together and get it over your your lay shaft, which has a flat on it, and it's somewhat difficult to get it all held into position without having anything fall over alignment while you're getting it as far in on that shaft as it needs to be, because the adjustment for the slipper is on the other side, which is different from most cars. Most cars you have the slipper clutch adjustment on this side. On a Team Associated vehicle, they're on the other side. They chose to put the active cooling right there, so it's right in the way. If I ever want to adjust, you can't even see it, if I ever want to adjust the nut that's on that slipper, I will have to take the fan off, or I will have to crudely get in there and just kind of hold the nut from the top while trying to like turn a tire and tightening or loosening it that way. The setting for your slipper clutch is to take the nut right to the edge of where the threads start. So you're not compressing the spring very much. Putting in the two plastic little spacers that it comes with, make sure you get those in the right orientation too. Just pay attention to the way everything's aligned when you're doing that. As well as make sure you're paying attention to the sizing of your screws as well, because things like putting in the rear arms and putting in the front arms, and when you put the transmission in, there are some short screws and there are some long screws, so just pay attention to what goes where. When you're first putting the rear end together, it shows you in the book about putting this rear bumper on. That rear bumper will not stay in place until the point where you're actually clamping the transmission down onto the chassis. So just be aware of that it's just going to float there. There's two screws that are going to be open holes in the back here that they don't want you to put in right away until you're putting the transmission on. And that's what clamps the rear bumper in between all that stuff. And then we're onto the rear hubs. And the rear hubs are sitting in here behind these tires. I'll show you some of the B-roll of when I was assembling them. There's a nice little anodized piece that sits on the top. Pay attention to the orientation of that as well. It is not symmetrical. Link mounts facing inwards towards your transmission for when you create your links. Then you're building the axles. Building the axles is very simple. I had no problems with that. It was much easier than building the axles on the TLR. I found the axles axle builds on the Associated are very easy. There's no holes that you can choose wrong. The pins all fit the exact same way. Even though the pins, there's two pins. There's the hex pin and there's the axle pin, and they have different part numbers in the book. But I mean, they are exactly the same part as much as I could tell. Then you're building your ball cups. All the ball cups are very simple. The only one that's a little bit different is these, the front for your steering Ackerman. These have an angled ball cup. Ball end, I guess. They have a non-linear ball end, which just changes your steering angle a little bit, so it gives you that extra kind of kick on your steering. The other thing I really love about Team Associated cars, and why I like my Yokomo more than my TLR, is because hold ball cups. Hold ball cups everywhere, which means that if a little, as you're racing, things loosen off. If that standoff gets loosened off, I can just put my screwdriver right down through the hole in the center of this and tighten it right up without having to pop any ball cups off. You never have to pop a ball cup off to tighten a screw on this car. Excellent. But the only thing that's hard to get at is the steering bell cranks and the servo. And to do that, you kind of got to take some stuff off the front end to get at those, just because you can't get anything in here through the front. It's all blocked off. But every two-wheel drive is like that. So you've built out your lengths, then you're building out the shocks. And the shocks are new in this kit. They are 13mm shock. And the things that are different about them isn't a whole lot other than the piston size, the shock body size, and then the rest of it is standard. So any of the previous upgrade parts that you could put on a 12mm regarding the cartridges all work. So I did put in some factory team machined pieces for the cartridges, which just improves that a little bit, as well as I used some 1UP Racing blue O-ring grease. In the book they always talk about using green slime. That's an Associated term. This is the equivalent of green slime by 1UP Racing. It's O-ring lube, which is very helpful in building out your cartridges, as well as for when you're putting the threaded part of your shock shaft down through the shock body. And the other thing I really like about this Team Associated kit is the shock shafts are titanium nitride coated shock shafts. So these shocks are pretty much as fully upgraded as you can get, except for they don't have aluminum shock caps. But in my opinion, you do not need aluminum shock caps because, like I said, everything's protected, having them in behind and covered by those little guards. So you don't need aluminum shock caps, as well as it'll keep some weight off the very high point of the car by keeping them plastic. So I say stay with the plastic shock caps for this car. It is still an emulsion style oil fill, so there is a bleeder cap in them, and the little bleeder screws do not use a little grommet. I've built a lot of techno cars, and that little super tiny bleed screw usually has an O-ring on the techno cars. On these you don't, so it's all reliant on the cap itself. Then when you're building up the shocks as well, just pay attention to the shock spring cups, as there are 3 different sizes, and you're not going to use the biggest one. You're going to use the 0, the plus 5, you're not going to use the 9. Right, something else about these shocks, because they are 13mm shocks, the pistons are a bigger size, and they come with 2-hole pistons. Now, speaking with a lot of racers as well as looking at a lot of the setup sheets by pros, almost no one likes the two-hole pistons, so I bought a precision hand drill which has millimeter-sized or sub-millimeter-sized drill bits, and I've drilled out additional hole in each piston. So I'm running 3-hole pistons. There's a little divot in each piston which allows you to get a little start of knowing where to put the hole. So I've added a 1.5 mil hole to the front, and I've added a 1.6 mil hole to the rear. So I'm running 2 by 1.6 plus 1.5 pistons front, and 2 1.7 by 1.6 piston rear. And I think I've got the dampening pretty dialed in. Then you're mounting on your shocks. No real surprises there. Again, when you're building out your shocks, anything that has to do with popping a ball cup in or threading the end link on your shock shaft, get a shock tool, get a shock building tool. It makes building shocks so much easier because you can actually clamp onto the actual shock shaft so it's not rotating while you're trying to thread on the ball end, all that stuff. It just makes building shocks so much easier, popping in ball cups. Then it's time to do the gearing. I had initially moved over my 31 tooth pinion from the Yokomo, and then I realized that it's probably way too tall a gearing. So I ended up dialing it back only 1 tooth. I am running more aggressive gearing than the book suggests. The motor that I'm running, which is a 13.5, they are suggesting to go for a 7.22 FDR. I'm currently running at a 6.7 FDR, and the reason why I stayed on a 6.7 FDR is because that's exactly what I had on my Yokomo, and I want to compare. I've kept the same electronics, the same gearing for final drive, and I'm going to try and just compare it chassis to chassis. So I moved over the same servo, the same speed control, the same radio, the same motor, and get to kind of test out the chassis difference. Then it's time to install the rear fan mount in bag 10 step 2. Leave that to the very end because it kind of gets in the way of everything. Then you're mounting your electronics and building out the battery tray. Now I did not install the Team Associated factory battery tray because I have mentioned many times that this is the worst battery tray made, and it's such a shame that this high quality World Championship RC car has one of the worst battery mounts ever fathomed. So I went for aftermarket. I put on an Exotech battery mount system. I'll show you the parts here. It's nice, beautiful carbon. It just allows you to slide this part of the mount back and forth, and allows you to move this part to clip in and out batteries, as well as it's height adjustable. Height adjustability takes a little bit of fiddling, so I've kept it in the higher position so I could put in my Genze's 5100 milliamp hour battery with these posts in the high position, but then also put in a 4000 milliamp hour low battery and just put some pieces of foam over these posts to hold down the low profile battery. Then it's time to do the body and the wing. So the wing comes with a little adjustment wedge, and you can have it be a 0 degree, 3 degree, or 6 degree kick-up. I am talked to some other racers who have the same car, and they are also using the 6 degree kick-up, so that's what I did on mine. But there is a little insert here for getting the wing out further. So if you choose to run a different transmission or whatnot, you can move the wing more forward, but this wing is in the most further back position there is, with the most aggressive downforce there is for angle. But I have cut down, this wing comes uncut, and I have cut it down to the lower position so to get a little bit more, a little bit less drag on our long straightaway, because we have a particularly long straightaway on our track. You do get this body in the kit. It comes clear, you know, you got to paint it yourself, so you can either take it to a painter or work on your painting skills. So I have done my paint, I've done my trimming. It connects on through Velcro. I did not use the Velcro that came with the kit. You do get Velcro and you do get double-sided tape in the kit, which is a nice touch if you don't have it, but I've used some different stuff, different brands of stuff that I like more. Also, the electronics tray is a separate piece. It's a weighted piece, so this one is 11 gram electronics tray that comes. It bolts on 4 little screws, it bolts onto the chassis, and that is an adjustable weight adjustment. So they've moved that, I believe it's a little bit more forward, and it's wider now on the 6.4. That's part of the reason why this chassis is wider longer, is because they moved the electronics more forward versus the 6.2 and the 6.3. Get your body on, get it all trimmed up, make sure that there's nothing interfering. You do have to kind of notch it out this side bigger for the fan versus this side, so just pay attention to the lines that they're showing you, and then you want to set your ride height. I've currently set this up to be a 19mm rear, 17mm front. We're going to find out at the track tonight if that's appropriate or not. And this is without the battery. It doesn't chassis slap on my little drop test, and I've done my... also, make sure you do your ride height adjustments with the battery in it, which it's not in right now. Then it's build out your tires, and then wheels and tires. The offset is the exact same as my Yokomo wheels and tires, so I am using Yokomo wheels right now, and because they're the same. You know, there's nothing to worry about there, nothing weird about wheel offsets. Okay, so I think that's it. That's my Team Associated B6.4D, and I'm hoping to have a good season with it, if not 2 or 3 seasons with it. If they come out with a 6.5 or a 6.6 and a 6.7, I don't know if I'm going to jump to them right away. I'm going to look at what they've changed and maybe buy some couple of parts for this as we go along. But I felt for a while that they're kind of overdue to jump to a B7 range. We've all been joking about that for years. When's the B7 coming? Maybe never, we don't know. Anyway, for now I'm running a B6.4D, the current newest Team Associated 2-wheel drive vehicle available. The Team Associated RC10 Buggy platforms have won 30 plus world championships at this point, and so it is a world-class buggy, and I'm going to try and put it through its paces. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to talk to me, leave a comment down below. As always, thanks for watching. Alright, this will be the first time getting it dirty.